Some sins are written in the blood before the heart ever learns to beat. The river swallowed sound first, then breath, then hope. Kai's lungs burned as the stones tied to his wrists dragged him deeper into the black water. Above, torchlight flickered. The village elders, satisfied that the half-breed curse would finally rest at the bottom of the Danube. A Dhampir, neither human nor vampire. Neither blessed nor damned enough for either world. He had been born in shame, raised in shadow, and now he would die in silence. His mother had been human, a healer from a forgotten village in Transylvania. His father, a vampire lord who loved her for 3 seasons before the hunger consumed even that. When Kai emerged, already bearing the marks of both worlds, the village had wept. The elders had debated whether to baptize him or burn him. They chose the river instead. 23 years. That was how long Kai had survived between 2 graves. He worked as a gravedigger in the monastery cemetery, fitting enough. The monks tolerated his presence because he never complained, never needed much food, never aged like other men. They whispered prayers when he passed. He heard everyone. But today, a child from the village had fallen ill. A fever that wouldn't break, skin turning gray as old bone. The mother came to Kai in desperation, remembering what her grandmother had whispered about Dhampir blood holding ancient medicine. He gave it willingly. One vein opened, dark liquid that glowed faintly silver in the lamplight. The child survived. The elders saw it as proof of witchcraft. Now, in the water's embrace, Kai felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, the desire to fight. His vampire heritage surged, superhuman strength coiling in his muscles, rage singing through his veins like a second heartbeat. He could tear these stones apart. He could rise and drain every elder dry. But his human half whispered something else. Let go. You never belonged anyway. The 2 halves of him warred as darkness closed in, as the river became his tomb, and the torchlight above faded to a distant prayer. Then, something shifted. The water itself seemed to pause. The current that had been pulling him down suddenly stilled, as if the river itself had taken a breath. A pulse of ancient power rippled through the stone and current, a vibration so old and deep that even Kai's hybrid nature recognized it, the presence of something far older than elders, far more terrible than villagers with torches, the Alpha, the first vampire, the one even legends feared to name. Above the water, the moon crested the mountain peak, full and bleeding red. And in that moment, as Kai's vision blurred toward final darkness, he felt it. A hand, impossibly strong, grasping his wrist, not pulling him down, pulling him up. The stones fell away like prayers rejected by heaven. Chapter 2. The Resurrectionist. The monastery bells rang midnight as Kai coughed water from his lungs, his body convulsing on cold stone beside the river. His heart, which beat irregularly at best, catching between human rhythm and vampire pulse, sputtered like a candle in wind. He was alive. The impossible had become unbearable. When his eyes finally opened, the world was too sharp, colors too vivid, sounds too precise. His hybrid senses amplified by proximity to death. The night smelled of iron and jasmine. The river sang in 3 languages, and standing above him, silhouetted against the moon, was a figure that should not exist. The man was tall, ancient in a way that had nothing to do with years. His skin held the pallor of marble that had been blessed and cursed in equal measure. His eyes, when they opened, were the color of old blood, and they held within them the weight of centuries, millennia. The kind of gaze that had witnessed empires rise from dust and return to it. You were meant to die, the man said. His voice carried the accent of a language that predated nations, predated kingdoms. It moved like smoke, like prayer, like a confession whispered across centuries. Kai tried to speak, failed. His throat was raw, his lungs still half filled with river and resignation. The elders believed they were cleansing the world of an abomination, the man continued, kneeling beside Kai with the grace of someone who had bent over countless bodies, some to save them, others to end them. They were wrong. You are no abomination. Then what am I? Kai's voice emerged broken, unrecognizable even to himself. The man's hand moved to Kai's chest, fingers spreading over his heart. He held them there, feeling the erratic rhythm. Human pulse, vampire pulse, human pulse, vampire pulse, an endless negotiation between two deaths. You are a bridge, the man said quietly, between the world of blood and the world of light, the rarest thing in existence and the loneliest. Who are you? Someone who has lived long enough to know that half-bloods are either the universe's cruelest joke or its greatest mercy. I came to find out which you would become. The man withdrew his hand. My name is Dmitri. I am very old, Kai. Old enough to remember when your kind were not hunted. Old enough to remember when love between human and vampire was not considered an abomination. Kai stared at him, at the impossible combination of beauty and horror that composed the Alpha's face. He recognized it now, the way recognition bypassed reason entirely. This was the source, the first, the original wound that had spawned all of them. Why did you save me? Kai asked. Dmitri's expression shifted, ancient grief moving across his features like clouds over a graveyard. Because I have spent centuries draining the world of light, and I am so very tired of drinking only darkness. He extended his hand. Can you stand? Kai took it, and the moment their skin touched, something shattered inside him. A wall he'd built across 23 years, brick by brick, made of rejection and solitude, and the terrible knowledge that he would never belong anywhere. Under Dmitri's touch, that wall crumbled, and in the rubble, something dangerous began to grow. Hope, or hunger, or both, indistinguishable at the edge of forever. Come with me, Dmitri said. There is a place between the mountains where we do not hunt the innocent, where your kind, our kind, remember what we were before we became monsters. And what were we? Kai whispered. Dmitri's smile was sad enough to break centuries. Lovers. Once. Long ago, we were simply lovers. Chapter 3. The Castle in the Pines. The fortress rose from the mountain like a memory refusing to fade. Stone walls dark as dried blood, windows that glowed with candlelight at impossible hours. A castle that appeared on no map, existed in no official record, but had cast its shadow across European folklore for more than 500 years. Kai ascended the spiral staircase beside Dmitri, their shadows climbing the walls in perfect synchronization. The air grew colder with each step, but it was a cold that felt clean, not the cold of death, but the cold of high places where few humans dared venture. How many live here? Kai asked. Now, 23? Once, there were hundreds. We were a court in the oldest sense of the word. Artists, philosophers, lovers. We built this place as a sanctuary, not a hunger. Dmitri paused at a landing where a stained glass window showed a scene of two figures, one human, one vampire, their hands intertwined over a chalice of wine. That was 500 years ago. Now most prefer to hunt alone. The old ways died harder than any of us expected. They emerged into a great hall where firelight danced across frescoes that seemed to move, scenes of transformation, of ecstasy, of sorrow so profound it had been painted directly into the plaster. A woman with silver hair was reading by the fire, her eyes tracking their entrance without lifting her head. An old man sat at a harpsichord, playing something that wasn't quite music, wasn't quite lament. This is our refuge, Dmitri said, and now it is yours. Kai felt the weight of it, not threat, but belonging. A belonging so profound it terrified him more than the river ever had. To belong meant to stay. To stay meant to love. to love, meant to eventually watch everyone die. That night, Dmitri brought him to a chamber where a mirror stood, tall as a man, framed in silver that had tarnished to the color of grief. "Look," Dmitri commanded gently. Kai approached the glass as if it might shatter. What stared back at him was a stranger, half-drowned, hollow-eyed, bearing the marks of both his natures written in his skin like scars. His hair hung wet. His lips held a faint tint of blue, but his eyes held something he'd never seen before. Recognition. "You are beautiful," Dmitri said from behind him. "Do not let the world's cruelty convince you otherwise." In the mirror, Dmitri stood, and when their eyes met through the glass, something shifted in the architecture of the universe. Kai felt it in his bones, the terrible, irresistible pull of attraction that transcended time, transcended species, transcended the laws of nature itself. "How long have you known?" Kai whispered. "How long have you known what I am?" "Since before you were born," Dmitri answered. "Your mother came to me years after your father died. She asked me to promise that if her child survived the world's hatred, I would find him. That I would show him that half was not less. It was expansion. It was transcendence." Kai turned to face him. "She's dead." "Yes, I was there when she died. She made me swear again that I would not let you become what the world tried to make you, that I would show you the other option." Dmitri's hand rose to Kai's cheek, and the touch was so tender it shattered something that Kai had spent 23 years assembling. "Will you let me? And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you." Chapter 4. The Blood Price. 3 weeks passed in the castle, and Kai learned what it meant to exist between moments, suspended in a state of becoming that felt like drowning and flying simultaneously. Dmitri taught him to read the old languages, to move through shadow without being consumed by it, to control the hunger that rose in his throat when humans passed near the fortress walls. But more than that, Dmitri taught him to see himself not as an aberration, but as an evolution. "We vampires are static," Dmitri explained one evening, as they stood in the library where thousands of books held the weight of centuries. "We do not change. We do not grow. But you, your human half, ages you, emotionally if not physically. You suffer. You feel consequence. You understand mortality in a way we can never quite grasp." He pulled a volume from the shelf, its pages yellowed with age. "This is why Dhampirs have always been hunted. Not because we fear you will destroy us, but because you remind us that we have destroyed ourselves." Kai ran his fingers across the spine. "What was she like?" "My mother?" "Kind," Dmitri said simply. "Recklessly kind. She nursed your father through his fever, knowing that vampires cannot truly be healed by human hands. She loved him anyway, and when you were born bearing both of them, she chose to raise you knowing the world would hate you for what you were born to be." Dmitri's hand found Kai's. "She made me promise that I would love you as she did, completely, without condition, and with full knowledge of the cost." "What cost?" Dmitri's smile was the saddest thing Kai had ever seen. "The cost of immortality when the person you love is mortal. The cost of watching centuries pass while one heart beats in linear time. The cost of knowing that love, true love, is the only thing sharp enough to cut even eternity." That night, as Kai lay in his chamber, a room that had once belonged to a Dhampir like himself, dead 300 years, he heard music coming from the tower. Dmitri's music, played on an instrument that sounded like regret, tuned to minor chords. Kai rose and followed the sound. The tower room was open to the night, the moon spilling across marble floors like milk. Dmitri sat at the harpsichord, his fingers moving with the precision of someone who had played the same grief for so long it had become a language all its own. "You should sleep," Dmitri said without turning. "You should stop playing sad songs," Kai replied. Dmitri laughed, a sound so unexpected that it seemed to surprise even him. "I have been playing sad songs for so long, I have forgotten how to play anything else. Will you teach me?" Kai approached slowly, aware that every step forward was a choice, that standing this close to Dmitri was equivalent to standing at a precipice, able to see clearly that a fall was inevitable, and choosing to remain on the edge anyway. "I don't know any happy songs," Kai said. "I don't know how to play." "Then we are perfectly matched," Dmitri said, and he pulled Kai down beside him on the bench. His hands guided Kai's fingers to the keys. "Play what you feel, not what the world taught you to feel, what lives in here." He pressed his hand over Kai's heart. They played together, Kai's rhythm chaotic and desperate, Dmitri's ancient and deeply controlled, until the two melodies wove into something neither could have created alone, something that sounded like transformation, like beginning, like the terrible, beautiful moment before the fall when flight still seems possible. When the music stopped, Dmitri's hand remained over Kai's heart. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. "The moment when your human pulse and vampire pulse align, that is where you are strongest. That is where you are most yourself." Kai turned to face him, aware that this moment, this precise second, would become the point around which all of eternity would revolve. "I'm afraid," he said. "Of what?" "Of loving you and dying anyway. Of you loving me and having to watch me age and break and eventually fail you." Dmitri's hand moved from Kai's heart to his face. "Then we will be afraid together. It is far less terrible that way." When they kissed, it tasted like blood and tears and the end of loneliness. It tasted like the beginning of something that would require both of them to surrender everything they had built to protect themselves. It tasted like the price of redemption being finally paid. Chapter 5. The Hunt. The first hunt came on a moonless night, when Kai's hunger had grown so profound that it vibrated in his bones like a second skeleton trying to break free. Dmitri took him to the foothills beyond the castle, to a wild place where civilization had not yet fully asserted its dominance. The air smelled of pine and old blood and the distant musk of deer. "Do not think," Dmitri instructed, his voice the only steady thing in a world that had suddenly become liquid, malleable, dangerous. "Your human mind will try to impose morality. Your vampire nature will try to impose hunger. Let them war, and in the space between them, find yourself." A doe emerged from the trees, graceful, unaware, its pulse a drumbeat Kai could hear across 50 meters of forest. His fangs descended before he consciously chose to bare them, his muscles coiled. His vision shifted, the world becoming a map of heat and blood and inevitability. "Go," Dmitri said. The hunt was pure instinct, pure becoming. There was no thought, no moral negotiation. There was only the terrible, beautiful clarity of predator and prey, of hunger satisfied, of transformation complete. When it was over, Kai stood over the doe, beautiful even in death, and felt something break inside him. Not the breaking of a person, but the breaking of a barrier. He had killed. He was a killer. And the horror of that revelation was immediately complicated by the liberation of it. He was not human anymore, but he had never been fully vampire either. He was something new, something neither world had prepared for. Dmitri emerged from the shadows, his own lips stained with the kill. "You are magnificent," he said. "Do you understand now? Do you feel what you are capable of?" Kai washed his hands in a stream, watching the water run clear, then red, then clear again. "I killed it," he said flatly, "not out of necessity, out of hunger." "Yes," Dmitri agreed. The first step toward becoming what you were meant to be is accepting that you are capable of monstrosity. The second step is choosing every single moment not to surrender to it entirely. Dmitri knelt beside him, his reflection wavering in the dark water. That is what your human half offers us, not weakness, choice, the ability to kill and then grieve, to hunger and then refuse, to be terrible and terrible things, and somehow still choose love. How do you do it? Kai asked. How do you live for centuries knowing what you are? By finding someone worth all of it, Dmitri said quietly. By letting yourself be seen by someone who knows your capacity for darkness and loves you not despite it, but alongside it. He reached for Kai's hand, and they remained there, two predators at the edge of a stream, allowing the night to witness what humans would never understand. That monsters too could grieve, that monsters too could choose, that monsters too could love. Chapter 6. The Confession. Winter came to the castle with a ferocity that seemed personal. Snow fell in sheets that looked like the accumulation of forgotten prayers. The courtyard became a landscape of white and shadow where even time seemed to move differently. Dmitri had become withdrawn, spending long hours in the tower, sometimes not emerging until the sun had already set. Kai, who had been learning to exist in the spaces between day and night, recognized the signs of something far older than his own sorrow. Regret that had calcified into something almost beautiful in its permanence. One evening, Kai found him in the library, surrounded by portraits, centuries of Dhampirs and vampires frozen in oils and pigment. Lovers, mostly. Some couples where both parties remained eternal. Others where the human had withered while the vampire was forced to love their corpse until even grief became a luxury they could no longer afford. How many? Kai asked, gesturing to the portraits. How many what? How many have you lost? Dmitri's hand moved across one portrait, a young woman with kind eyes, painted perhaps 200 years ago. All of them, he said. I have lost all of them. The ones who aged, the ones who chose mortality over eternity with me, the ones I allowed to hunt me into the sun because I could not bear another century without them. He turned to face Kai, and his eyes held something that transcended sorrow. This is what I have been trying to prepare you for. This is the cost of loving me. I already know the cost, Kai said. I've always known. Do you? Dmitri's voice was sharp now, almost cruel in its honesty. Do you understand that if you choose to remain human, I will watch you decay? That your skin will wrinkle, and your hair will gray, and your voice will weaken? And I will love you exactly as much as I love you now, which means I will watch you leave me in the cruelest way possible, not through death, but through the slow dissolution of the body I fell in love with? Then turn me, Kai said simply. Make me what you are. No. Dmitri's refusal was absolute, ancient, carved from the stone of choices he had made centuries ago. That is the one thing I will not do. Your human half is what makes you bearable to love. If you become fully vampire, you will lose the capacity to grieve, to feel consequence, to understand why it matters that you do not hunt the innocent. You will become like me, beautiful and terrible, and fundamentally alone, even in the presence of someone who loves you. Kai moved to him, close enough that he could feel the chill radiating from Dmitri's stone-like skin. So what are we doing? Kai asked. Why are you teaching me to hunt? Why are you loving me if the only ending is suffering? Because, Dmitri said, and his hand rose to cup Kai's face with impossible tenderness. You asked me to. Because your mother made me promise. Because I'm so tired of being alone with my immortality, and you are the only person in 500 years who has made me believe that there might be something worth continuing. He leaned forward, and his kiss tasted like salt and regret, and the terrible, transcendent relief of finally surrendering to something beyond your control. We cannot promise each other forever, Kai, but we can promise each other now, and now is infinite if you stop counting hours. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. Chapter 7. The Mirror Breaks, Rewritten. The monastery found them on a night when the stars had aligned into constellations that spelled out warnings in old languages. The hunters came with torches that burned with holy oil, with priests whose prayers had been honed across generations, with silver chains blessed by cardinals who had never seen a vampire but knew, with the certainty of doctrine, that such creatures were abominations against creation itself. Kai stood in the courtyard of the castle as the sun descended, watching the light fracture across the stone walls like the last moments of a dying world. He had exactly 40 minutes before full darkness fell, and Dmitri could emerge from the tower where he had spent the last hour in meditation, gathering the ancient power that would allow him to face an army and possibly survive. But survival was not what Kai wanted for him. The lead priest was a man named Father Constantine, ancient in his own right, bearing the scars of encounters with the undead that predated Kai's birth by decades. His voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had never been taught to doubt his own righteousness, who believed that cruelty performed in God's name was simply obedience. "Release the demon!" Constantine called out, his voice cutting through the mountain silence like a blade through silk. "The alpha vampire. We know he resides here. Release him, and we will show mercy to you, Dhampir. We will burn you quickly. We will grant you the kindness of speed, rather than the slow dissolution that awaits all half-breeds." Kai could have fought. His hybrid strength would have torn through their ranks like a scythe through wheat. His vampire reflexes would have moved him through their midst in ways their human eyes could not even process. He could have turned the courtyard into a sanctuary of blood and screams. But something his mother had told him, something Dmitri had reinforced, whispered with the tenderness of genuine love. There is another way. He stepped forward, his hands raised, his body language open and vulnerable in a way that was almost obscene given what he was capable of. "He's not here," Kai said, and the lie tasted like ashes and betrayal and the purest form of sacrifice. "The Alpha. He left 3 weeks ago, heading north toward Russia. I don't know where. He never tells me his destinations. He comes and goes like a phantom. I am merely his servant, a Dhampir he keeps around for entertainment and blood." The words were poison in his own mouth. Each syllable was a renunciation of everything Dmitri had taught him, everything they had built together in the castle's hidden chambers. But Kai delivered them with perfect conviction, drawing on every human emotion he possessed to make them believable. Constantine's eyes narrowed, searching Kai's face for deception. For a moment, a terrible, fragile moment, Kai thought the priest might see through the lie, might recognize the impossible love that bound him to Dmitri, despite everything. But then the priest's expression shifted, hardened into certainty. "You are shielding him," Constantine said, not as a question, but as a pronouncement of fact. "I am saving him," Kai corrected, and this was the truth beneath the lie. "From what he has saved me from, the certainty that love is impossible, that eternity is only worth living if you have already destroyed your capacity to feel. If you kill him, you kill the one being in 500 years who has taught me that half is not less. Half is expansion, half is transcendence." Constantine's face twisted with something that might have been pity or might have been rage. He raised his hand, and the hunters advanced, 12 of them, each bearing crosses and holy water and silver-tipped spears. Kai felt the chains wrap around his wrists first, silver links that burned through skin, through flesh, down toward bone. The metal seared where it touched, and the pain was exquisite in its specificity, a sensation so acute it seemed to transcend suffering and become something almost transcendent. His vampire blood recoiled from the silver, but his human biology kept him conscious, kept him aware of every second of the agony. Then came the holy water, splashed across his shoulders, his face, his exposed skin. It was like acid, like fire, like the dissolution of everything he had just learned about himself. He gasped, and the inhalation brought the scent of charring flesh, of his own dissolution. But he did not fight. He did not resist. Instead, he allowed his body to go limp, allowed the hunters to believe they had won, allowed them to drag him toward the river, the same river where he had nearly drowned all those weeks ago. As they moved through the courtyard, he caught sight of the castle tower, a single candle appearing in the window, then disappearing. Once, twice, 3 times, Dimitri's signal, Dimitri's acknowledgement, Dimitri's heartbreak rendered in light and shadow. The hunters bound Kai to a pyre that had been constructed with obsessive care. Dry wood, stacked precisely, accelerant poured with ritualistic precision. They were not merely going to kill him. They were going to transform him into an offering, into a purification by fire. As they lit the wood, as the flames began their inexorable climb toward his body, Kai allowed himself one moment of doubt. One moment where he questioned whether he had made the right choice, whether love was worth this dissolution, whether redemption required this particular sacrifice. Then the flames touched his flesh, and that question became irrelevant. Chapter 8. The Resurrection, Rewritten. The fire consumed his vampire nature first. Kai felt it burning away, the predatory instincts, the hunger that could never be fully sated, the capacity to move without morality or consequence. The silver chains conducted the heat directly into his bloodstream, transforming it into a conduit for his own destruction. The holy water, blessed by priests who had spent their lives learning to kill beings like him, began a systematic dissolution of every supernatural cell in his hybrid body. He was being unmade, and yet paradoxically he was also being remade. The pain was so complete, so all-consuming, that it transcended suffering and became something almost clarifying. As his consciousness fractured at the edges, as he felt himself dissolving into nothing, into less than nothing, Kai understood something that Dimitri had been trying to teach him for weeks. Suffering, when chosen, becomes a language. Pain, when embraced, becomes prayer. His screams filled the mountain valley, echoing off stone and snow, carrying across centuries the wail of a being torn between 2 natures, 2 loves, 2 impossible ways of existing in a world that had room for neither. But then, a sound that cut through the agony like a blade through flesh. "I refuse." Dimitri's voice did not merely enter the courtyard, it shattered it. The Alpha emerged from the shadows with a fury that seemed to darken the sun itself, though the sun had already set and the world had surrendered to night. But his presence, his rage, his absolute refusal to allow this moment to continue as prescribed, these things seemed to pull light from other dimensions, to warp reality itself around the force of his will. The hunters scattered like prayer before a curse. Some dropped their torches and ran. Others raised their crosses, hoping that the symbols they believed would protect them might actually function in the presence of something older than Christianity, older than the church, older than the God whose name they invoked. But Dimitri paid them no attention. He moved toward Kai with a speed that seemed to fold space itself, as if the distance between them was not truly a distance, but merely a consensual hallucination that he had chosen to ignore. The chains holding Kai shattered under the sheer force of ancient power, power accumulated across 500 years of refusing to die, of choosing existence even when existence meant bearing an eternity of solitude. And then Dimitri was there, pulling Kai from the flames with hands that burned where the holy water touched them, with skin that blistered where the consecrated ground beneath the pyre rejected his presence. His own blood spilled in rivulets that seemed to carry light instead of darkness, not the silver glow of vampire essence, but something else, something that predated the categories of light and dark. "I will not," Dmitri whispered against Kai's burning skin, his voice cracking with an emotion that seemed to be part rage, part anguish, part absolute commitment. "Let you choose sacrifice for me again. Not for 1 hour. Not for 1 moment." He held Kai's face between his palms, and where his tears fell, tears that a vampire should not be capable of producing, tears that seemed to be composed of liquefied centuries of sorrow, the burns began to heal. The blistered skin knitted itself back together. The charred flesh transformed into new tissue that was neither fully human nor fully vampire, but something transcendent in its hybridity. "I have spent 500 years refusing to love anything," Dmitri continued, and his voice was breaking now, fragmenting into the accumulated weight of all those years, all those nights of solitude, all those centuries of choosing existence over the relief of destruction. "I built walls inside myself that are older than nations. I convinced myself that love was a luxury only for humans, only for beings who understood that time had limits. But you—" He pulled Kai closer, so close that their foreheads touched, so close that they were breathing the same air, sharing the same moment in a way that seemed to erase all the boundaries between self and other. "You have broken every wall I constructed. You have made me believe that eternity is not a punishment if the eternity is shared with someone who understands that love is not the absence of darkness. Love is the choice to move through darkness while holding someone's hand." The hunters had begun chanting prayers, summoning courage or divine intervention or both. But their words seemed to bounce off the sphere of energy that had formed around Kai and Dmitri, a space that had become separate from the world, removed from the ordinary physics that bound most of existence. "Choose," Dmitri said, and his voice carried the weight of a command that transcended mere words. It was a summons across the boundaries of mortality and immortality, a demand that Kai make the choice that would define not just his existence, but the entire trajectory of what he would become. "Choose eternity. Choose me. Choose the terrible, beautiful aftermath of love that refuses to die. Not because I demand it. Not because your mother made me promise, but because you understand, in this moment, that some loves are worth the cost of forever." Kai opened his mouth to speak, but what emerged was not language. What emerged was transformation. The process began in his blood, molecules rearranging themselves, restructuring into a configuration that had never existed before and would never exist again. It began in his bones, which seemed to become both harder and more luminous, as if they were being reformed from moonlight and ancient memory. It began in his heart, which for the first time in his existence beat in perfect synchronization with Dmitri's, 2 rhythms aligning into a single pulse that echoed across the valley like the heartbeat of the universe itself. But it was not a transformation into a simple vampire. This was not a conversion from human to monster. This was something else entirely, a transcendence that honored both his natures while simultaneously transcending both. The human part of him did not die. Rather, it merged with the vampire part, creating a synthesis that neither nature alone could achieve. His scream became song, not a song of agony or despair, but a song of becoming. A song of 2 beings, one ancient beyond measure, one newly born, finding the frequency at which they could exist in perfect harmony. The sound resonated across the mountains, echoed through centuries, carried forward to futures that had not yet been written. The hunters fell to their knees, unable to bear the beauty of what they were witnessing. The thing they had come to destroy, transmuting into something more transcendent than anything their theology had prepared them for. They began to weep, though whether from awe or heartbreak or the destruction of everything they believed, none of them could say. As the transformation reached its apex, Kai felt himself expanding, not in body, but in consciousness. He could suddenly perceive time not as a linear progression, but as a landscape he could traverse. He could see his childhood, his drowning, his resurrection by Dmitri's hand. He could see forward into futures that spiraled away into infinity, each one containing infinite variations on a single theme, the two of them moving through eternity together. And in that moment, as his last purely human breath became his first breath as a transcendent being, Kai finally understood what Dmitri had been trying to teach him all along. Mercy was not the absence of suffering. Mercy was the transformation of suffering into love. And love, true love, was the only force in existence powerful enough to resurrect the dead, to redeem the damned, to justify the terrible beauty of eternity. The moon rose full and bleeding crimson, and beneath its light, two beings, one formed from the dawn of vampiric creation, one formed from the synthesis of human and vampire transcendence, held each other at the edge of forever and wept. Not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming recognition that they had, against all odds, against all theology, against all the laws of nature itself, found each other. And in finding each other, they had discovered the only true immortality, being loved completely by someone who knows exactly what you are and chooses you anyway. The hunters retreated, unable to bear witness any longer. The pyre burned out. The river flowed on, indifferent to the miracles that had occurred along its banks. And Kai and Dmitri remained, a bridge between mortality and forever, a testimony to the redemptive power of love that refuses to be bound by the categories that human understanding tried to impose upon it. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned.